Okay, hey everybody, this is Grace, and in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about, my, well, I haven't mentioned on this channel in I don't know how long, the Victorson County series, and it started on this channel, I think, or maybe it was the second one, but I haven't mentioned it in a while because of everything going on with my health and all. And I did on other channels, but not this one, because this one I was focusing on my health. And I'm trying to find my composition book that I wrote this stuff in. But I want to talk about, how some things have evolved. And all along I have basically said that they do things different, in a different way in Victorson County, Texas. And they do. They have their own sense of justice. It's a very wealthy county. Lots of, it started generations ago, many generations ago, with old money, and lots of it. And it just spread, and the only people there that can own property and inherit property and such are the people who are descendants of the first settlers, somehow descendants, bloodline. And my goodness, I'm out here and it's just like everything is irritating me. But anyway, but I want to say that over these years, I've been doing this for years now, some of the things have changed, such as, I would say that it's along the line of an alternative county, okay, like alternative universe, but more of a county. And one time I described it, or more than one time actually. Let me see, I wrote it in here somewhere. Nope, that's not the one. Oh goodness, am I gonna have probably left that one in the house? I'm sitting out in front of my, here it is, in front of my house. Anyway, maybe it's in this one. Let's see. But I basically said it along this line. Okay, there's an alternative county, and that to think along the line of that. I'm going to lose my voice right off the bat. You watch. It's my first video. Watch. Okay. Think of alternative Earths. Okay, say two Earths. One of them you can't see from our Earth, and they brush across one another and bruise one another, but where it bruised, and then went around one another, each place where it touched, they actually swapped places. Like Victorson County, the whole county swapped, okay, from our Earth to their Earth. And sometimes it was town, sometimes it could be a lake, it could be, but it would manage to get the whole of it, okay? Countries, towns, counties, states, seas even, okay? And it would somehow manage to work, okay? And I basically said something like that. Victorson County is one of the places, there's, and swapped. And I didn't say when because, yeah. But, so, let me see. Okay, now, the thing about it is, it was yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I asked, I got online and typed it out. And, did a Google search, and the AI overview came up. And I started practically, I did start laughing a little bit, chuckling about it, because I did not, I know these things, I've heard these things, but I haven't heard this ever. That this is what I was saying, I did not hear it called this, but it is part of string theory. I did not know that. Of course, I've heard of string theory, I've heard of the Big Bang, I've heard of quantum physics, I've heard of these things, but I never heard of this. And, that they touch one another and they swap. they could swap. I don't know if it actually said that they can swap, but that was my version, that they touch one another, bruise one another, and apparently part of spring. I keep wanting to say string theory, and now as, your resident genius, or one of, I am actually, actually am a genius. So, yeah, I thought it was funny. Maybe it's just my sense of humor that I would go there in a series. I've been writing this series for many years, and even before I started making the series videos, they're basically rough drafts. Some of them I'm telling the story, some of the parts of the story is part of the series, and I have them on different channels, spin-offs, and different storylines. And some people have to go cross over, because they're part of one county, Victorson County. There is another county that, south of it, that's starting to become, that had started a few years ago, I think, to become part of it. But they're basically where they do the distribution centers, and they had moved them there, and which that county was very thankful for, because all, many of the whole county, their children, their adult children, had moved away, and the only people there were the people who were retired, and their children moved somewhere else to find jobs, and they wanted them back. They wanted their own county to start to flourish, and they made a deal, and they did the deal, and it worked, and now they can prosper again. But anyway, but yeah, this whole thing with the, I thought it was funny, string theory. But basically, where did I get that word from? Basically, I use it to mainly because, like laws that I've said, I think in every video that I've mentioned something about this, I'll say that they do, like the elders pretty much run the county, but they have their own sense of justice in Victorson County. They're good, decent people, but and I say sometimes they skirt it, sometimes they get a little too close, sometimes they're on the edge, and however I describe it. But they're doing things that are legally, but it's still different. Okay, and not many mess with them because they're so wealthy, and they create jobs outside of the county, outside of Texas, outside of, it's in Texas, outside of Texas, and so on, and opportunities. So we all know how that works, don't we? Tends to, in some degree. But they still stay within the law. They manage it. But like I said, and right now they're starting something that they have decided they have to. Okay, they really have to buff it up and learn quite a bit about how they can stay within the law yet do it. And it's because some of the cases that Jim's enforcement and Sheriff Mitch and so on and so forth, they're starting to come finally. Some of them started around the year 2020, and there was so much going on then with just 2020, and that they locked down the town, and they locked down the county, and everything within the law, and they decided they were going to have a gated county. Yes, gated, and they basically started vetting construction workers and construction crews, and they had them build basically the gate around the county. But a lot of it was in housing, like apartments, condos, townhomes, some houses that were on the very edge of the county. Of course, you have roads and everything, but yeah, they managed to do it. Like I said, lots of money, lots and lots of these people who were doing the work. They were promised that they could buy their own place there, and they did. And as long as they were vetted, they had already been vetted, and they hadn't broken any laws or any of that stuff. They stayed good people, good decent people. Their family were good decent people, and they allowed them to stay. And they also opened up a town, Technology. It's called Technology, I believe, and they allowed people to come in, and mainly after 2020, once it started opening up again, and well, once that things changed. But around that time, 2020, they started getting weird little threats to the elders, the ones that ran the county, and they were in one certain town, at one ranch mansion. They had some staying in other ranch mansions, but not really, not for any purpose. They just did, or did they? Or am I lying here? That then they decided to break them all up and move them to different ranches and ranch mansions. Some of these ranches, like I say, filthy rich people, old money and lots of it, and all the inheritance. They tended not to have more than 1 to 2 children. So think about the inheritance sitting there. And these are people who didn't have to work, but they did work because they wanted to, be, productive members of society, and they pushed their money back within the society. And so they had this money. They had money to do all this, and they did it, and they didn't worry about anything. They're really good investors too, and on and on and on. There's so much to this, but with this, what's going on right now, after all that was done and settled, stuff was coming up. Stuff, that was making, when finally the dust settled, the law enforcement started saying, something's not right. Okay? Besides the weird little cryptic messages they were receiving in strange ways for the elders, sometimes it was just something left like on a countertop at a restaurant or somewhere. A little note, and it was very cryptic. But that still hasn't been resolved, of what exactly was all that about. And but they had to move on because there were other things, like some people had finally started. Well, it's people who had family members, like say a woman was married, and she'd been married for 20 years, say, to this one man, and all of a sudden she got after 2020, say 2021, I'm leaving out certain things on purpose. After that, she received, all of a sudden she came home one day, and there was a note from her husband and divorce papers saying, I'm leaving everything to you. I've had some kind of story like, I don't want this marriage anymore, and I'm leaving everything to you. Signed, sealed, delivered kind of thing, that's it, overdone. And that, various kinds of things like this were happening, but people weren't reporting them to, like, the police as missing people. They weren't saying, well, my husband's a missing person now because I can't get in touch with him, or my wife, or my child, or, not my child, but my mother. One of them was, the mother. And the mother was, a missing person. But it wasn't, but what was happening were they were being left handwritten messages, that showed their handwriting and all that. It says, had enough, goodbye. Some of them were parents. They just said, adios. We have other things we want to do with our lives. And, some of them were quite cruel. And the people who were receiving them over years now, and they were saying, they didn't want to report it. They were embarrassed, or felt humiliated. They felt like they would go into a depression, stages of grief, but they still would not report them, because they felt like it was more like just a family thing, a personal thing. There's Adam coming out and looking at me. Okay, I'm waving at him. I don't know what he was pointing at, but anyway, he threw me off here. But yeah, at some point, somebody, I don't even remember who it was, reported, like one woman, Diva, her husband's a lawyer, but he was a lawyer in the big city, which is 2.5-hour drive outside of the closest place in Victorson County. Okay, they just call it the big city. And that's not part of Victorson County. And they don't have a big city in Victorson County. They have one called Needles that is close to a big city, but they don't have a big city. And people go there for various reasons. Sometimes some of them have property there, but once 2020 happened, they all came back. Pretty much every one of them. But like this diva's husband, he was there, you know, he lived there in the big city because he was a lawyer and he had more of a practice there. They call them practices, yeah. Anyway, and what do they call it? I don't even know. I've never had a lawyer. I never hired a lawyer, I should say. But I've never had to use a lawyer. How about that? And anyway, her husband just, one day, she couldn't reach him. And he stayed there, she stayed where she lived in Victorson County. And he would come, you know, visit. And they had a son together who was grown up as he is now. He's like 35 or something like that. You know, he's older. Well, he disappeared too. He wrote his, she's basically his girlfriend. I don't like to say baby mama. You know, I don't like that. But Diva likes to talk like that. But he wrote Tabitha, his child's mother, and told her he was going to the big city, and she could believe it. She could, because that's how he was. He had always been talking about he wanted to go to the big city. Now their child she's, oh my goodness, how old now? She's probably still in maybe the 5th grade, or maybe she's in middle school now. But you know, so she didn't report it either. You know, people didn't report it, but there were different cases like that. But I don't remember if it was Diva or who basically did report it. It was before Diva, before Tabitha. And now that I think about it, and they started getting little hints. The law enforcement were sort of like, you know, something attached to these two things, those cryptic messages and these people who are just kind of disappearing. You know, but a lot of people didn't report it. And how were they going to get the word out without making people in Victorson County a little paranoid? You see what I'm saying? You know, why are all these people disappearing? Yeah, you see what I'm saying? You know, you can't, I mean, how can you advertise is a question? You know, dilemma there. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm going to say more on it on another day.